A thick veil of blackness wrapped around the USS Sentinel as it cut through the cold waters of the Pacific. The stars above provided the only light. Even the moon had vanished behind dense clouds. From a distance, the aircraft carrier seemed to dissolve into the horizon. No signal lights, no flight deck illumination, not even a glimmer from the bridge. It was as if the 100,000-ton behemoth had simply disappeared. Inside the Combat Information Center, Commander Rachel Torres stood hunched over a dimly backlit tactical display, her eyes scanning the motionless grid. The glow from the screen outlined the tension etched into her features. Despite the routine of these exercises, going completely dark never felt ordinary. It was a drill, but it mimicked wartime protocol down to the second. Every antenna had been shut off. Radio chatter was forbidden. They were ghosts in the sea. Torres spoke in a low voice. "Any passive sonar contact?" Lieutenant Harris, seated across from her at the radar and sonar console, gave a subtle shake of his head. "Still nothing, ma'am. Surface remains quiet. No emissions detected either." "Keep your ears sharp. If they're out there, they're not broadcasting either." She turned to glance at the overhead monitors. Blanks. Not a single thermal or radar blip. That was the idea. They were running in full EMCON, emission control. It was one of the most extreme states of naval stealth. Every outward signal was silenced. The goal wasn't just to avoid detection, it was to be entirely invisible. Out on the flight deck, Petty Officer Cole Mercer walked carefully between parked FA-18s, guided only by a dim red safety light in his hand. The catapults were dormant. The roar of engines had been replaced by a hushed hum of distant generators and the occasional low thud of a watertight door closing. This wasn't the carrier the world usually saw. No buzzing aircraft, no gleaming lights, no ceremonial movements. This was the Sentinel at its quietest, most dangerous state. Mercer paused for a moment, looking out toward the infinite Black Sea. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Though nothing stirred on the surface, years in the Navy had taught him one thing: silence often meant company. The enemy could be just as dark, just as quiet, only one mistake away from revealing themselves. Below deck in the command room, Captain Elias Monroe leaned over a folded map as a junior officer placed a weather update beside him. Monroe, a grizzled leader with more than 2 decades of sea time, didn't look up. "Wind's shifting east," he muttered. "We're on schedule, but let's expect limited visibility through the night. I want us plotted 5 miles south of the last vector. If anyone's watching from space, let's make them guess." "Yes, sir," the officer replied and left in silence. Captain Monroe straightened and walked to the main observation panel, where the bridge crew worked in near darkness. Each screen was turned to its lowest brightness setting, every communication routed through hard-wired landlines. He glanced around, ensuring each sailor respected the blackout. Even a stray phone screen could betray their position to an orbiting satellite or a patrolling drone. Back in the combat center, Torres shifted slightly as a new set of data quietly scrolled across her screen. A passive sonar ping, a weak, almost imperceptible signal had bounced back. Not mechanical, but not natural either. She tapped the screen and whispered, "Harris, isolate that return." He did, amplifying the signal with a series of smooth keystrokes. "It's odd," he murmured. "Not a submarine. Maybe a surface vessel running cold, small displacement." Torres felt her heart rate rise. "Estimate distance? Maybe 12 clicks. No movement yet." She leaned closer. "Could be a trawler, could be something else." "Do we light them up?" "No," she said instantly. "We stay dark." Captain Monroe entered moments later, summoned without fanfare. He read the sonar logs with a single glance. "We're being shadowed. Either a test or a probe. If we power up now, we confirm our presence." Torres nodded. "And if we don't?" They'll have to get closer. Then we find out who's watching. Monroe turned, looking out across the pitch-dark room. The tension was quiet, restrained, but palpable. He knew many on this crew had never experienced this level of stealth before. This wasn't just about keeping lights off. It was about patience, about understanding that invisibility was a weapon in itself. On the deck, Mercer stood still as the red light in his hand flickered. He turned slowly. There, off in the distance, he thought he saw a faint glimmer. Just one. Barely a shimmer across the water. Then it was gone. He clicked his radio earpiece twice. No words, just the alert. Below, the bridge received the signal. Torres narrowed her eyes. "They're testing us," she whispered. Monroe gave a low, humorless chuckle. "Let them." For the next hour, no movement occurred. No further signals were picked up. No lights returned on the horizon. Just the low, endless hum of the carrier and the soft rhythm of the sea. Finally, Torres sat back, exhaling. "They're gone, or they think we are." Monroe placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's the point, Commander. The most dangerous ship at sea is the one they never see coming." Above them, in the still darkness, the USS Sentinel continued forward, unseen, unheard, and fully prepared. The air inside the intelligence room was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your ears and tightens your chest. Commander Rachel Torres sat at the head of the table, her fingers laced under her chin, eyes locked onto a single satellite image slowly rendering on the projector. The image revealed an unusual wake pattern, barely visible against the black sheen of ocean surface. Likely a ship, but one without any transponder signal. No AIS broadcast. No identifying lights. Ghosting. "It's the same pattern from last week," she said flatly, breaking the silence. "Northeastern Pacific. Always on nights we run MCON drills." Across the table, intelligence specialist Dana Quinn adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "They know our schedules," she said, "or they're guessing and getting lucky. Either way, it's too precise to be coincidence." Captain Elias Monroe stood with arms crossed, watching the crew digest that reality. "They're not here to sink us," he said. "They're learning, observing, waiting for a mistake." "But if we break MCON just once," Torres added, "they'll catch our exact position. Maybe more." The implication hung in the room. The Sentinel wasn't just a vessel. It was a floating air base, a symbol of American reach. Its stealth wasn't merely operational, it was strategic. If adversaries could reliably predict or track its movements, the balance of deterrence would falter. A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. It opened to reveal Petty Officer Mercer, still in his grease-streaked flight deck coveralls, looking unusually grim. "Sorry to interrupt, sirs," he said, "but we found something." Monroe raised an eyebrow. "Go on?" "In Bay 3, behind one of the F-18s, someone disabled the sensor dampeners. One of the radio altimeters is broadcasting, low frequency, but steady." Torres's head snapped up. "Who was assigned to that bird?" "Ensign Phillips," Mercer replied. "But he's off rotation. Someone had access under his name." Monroe didn't need to speak. The room's temperature dropped by several degrees as the implications settled. "Infiltration?" Quinn asked quietly. "Or insider compromise," Torres muttered. "Shut it down now," Monroe said, "and sweep every aircraft, every terminal. I want full diagnostics before sundown." As Mercer rushed out, Torres turned toward Monroe. "If they're this close to compromising our stealth systems, we're not just playing defense anymore. We're exposed." Monroe walked to the screen again, eyes tracing the faint wake on the satellite feed. "If they're baiting us into revealing ourselves," he said, "maybe it's time we spring our own trap." That night, while the carrier floated quietly through the dark Pacific, the Sentinel initiated what Monroe called black net. Every outward-facing signal remained dead. But internally, a decoy frequency was activated, designed to mimic a compromised communication burst. It was subtle, just strong enough to be intercepted by any nearby signal sweepers. Down in the sonar room, Lieutenant Harris tracked the response. "We've got movement," he said, voice tight. "Bearing 182, closing at 15 knots. Torres arrived seconds later. "Can you ID them?" "Still no active signal, but their hull is low profile, not military or not openly. Could be a disguised trawler again." She stared at the blip. They took the bait. Within 20 minutes, the ship had shadowed Sentinel's dummy signal and held course. They were getting greedy. Torres keyed her secure mic and spoke softly. "Activate drone recon, silent mode, launch high and wide." Far above the carrier's flight deck, a Raven-class drone lifted into the sky without a sound. Its thermal sensors glowed faint orange on the intelligence room's monitor. As it arced above the suspected vessel, its image sharpened. There was no fishing equipment on deck, no crew out in the open, just a boxy structure with antennae and modular arrays, partially tarped. "SIGINT ship," Quinn confirmed. "Electronic warfare, probably Russian." Torres leaned in closer. "So now we ask, do we let them leave?" Monroe joined them, calm as always. "Number. We let them see nothing. And then we let them wonder what they missed." By sunrise, the sky was washed in silver blue, the calm water reflecting the early morning light. But Sentinel was already long gone, its course having shifted in total darkness during the final phase of the decoy operation. The rogue vessel remained behind, floating in confusion, trying to make sense of signals that had vanished, like ghosts. On board the bridge, Monroe stood beside Torres as the watch rotated in. "What do you think they'll report back?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "That they got close, that maybe they nearly had us, but that we slipped away. Again. And next time?" He nodded slowly. "Next time we won't just vanish. We'll be watching back." The glow of dawn broke across the carrier's hull, but below deck, the work continued in hushed tones and guarded steps. Every terminal was being resecured, every ID re-verified. The lesson was clear. The darkness was not just their shield. It was a battlefield, and the war had already begun. In the days following the failed interception attempt, the tension aboard the USS Sentinel no longer simmered. It thrummed beneath the surface like static electricity waiting to arc. The crew moved with heightened awareness, every shift of equipment and whisper of metal echoing louder than usual. No one dared relax. Something had changed. Not just the rules of engagement, but the trust in their own invisibility. Commander Rachel Torres sat alone in her quarters, staring at the hard drive recovered from the compromised aircraft. Forensics hadn't cracked the encryption yet, but its presence alone confirmed the crew's worst fears. Someone aboard had invited the enemy in. It wasn't sabotage, it was surveillance, a subtle hand gathering intelligence from inside the most secure warship on Earth. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she said. Lieutenant Quinn stepped in, eyes sharp, clutching a tablet. "You need to see this." She handed the device over. It displayed a frame-by-frame thermal video feed from the drone that had shadowed the rogue vessel. But it wasn't the ship that caught her attention. It was the figure standing at its stern, hooded, face obscured, holding something rectangular in his hand. "Zoom in," Torres said. Quinn nodded. "Already tried. Facial ID unsuccessful, but this part, watch." The figure raised the device and in a sequence of deliberate movements, pointed it toward the sky, not at the drone, at the exact angle of a geostationary satellite's known orbit. He held it steady for 5 seconds, then turned and disappeared below deck. "They knew," Torres whispered. "They weren't tracking us. They were uploading." The realization hit like cold water. The infiltration wasn't to monitor the carrier in real time. It was to relay information beyond interception. Whatever was recorded on board had already reached whoever was orchestrating the deception. That changed everything. Captain Monroe, now summoned, reviewed the footage with the same stony expression that never revealed emotion. When it ended, he spoke quietly. "We can't win this with shadows anymore." Torres looked at him. "You're saying we break blackout protocol?" "I'm saying we make noise, loud enough to drown out their ears." Within hours, a plan was devised. The Sentinel would stage a simulated mechanical failure, an overt engine shutdown, at sea. They would drop anchor, ignite auxiliary lighting, and appear vulnerable. A sitting duck, but only for a window of minutes, just long enough to bait any nearby surveillance platforms into overextending. The entire maneuver would be recorded from multiple angles by friendly satellites and cloaked UAVs. "Let them think we're blind," Monroe said. "Then let them see what a blind giant can still do." The trap unfolded at dusk. The ocean was painted in shades of molten copper, the sun bleeding into the horizon. At 19:30 hours, the Sentinel came to a dead halt, lights on, engines down. Radio silence maintained, but visual signals all screamed, "Distressed vessel," an irresistible prize. And just as predicted, movement flickered on sonar. 3 unknown signatures, fast-moving, no AIS, no identification, a surface craft and 2 submerged subs, likely miniatures, approaching from different vectors. In the carrier's CIC, tension cracked through the silence. Quinn tracked the surface vessel. "Closing distance, 600 meters, launching quad rotor, small drone, visual recon dot." Torres's voice was low, steady. "Maintain posture. Wait for confirmation." The drone circled overhead. Its lens captured the deck crew, feigning confusion, acting out minor damage assessments. The bait was working. The intruder drone hovered, lingered, then a blip. "Second signal from below," Quinn said. "Underwater acoustic pulse. They're pinging us." "On my mark," Monroe said. The screen lit up with new data. Now. Within seconds, 2 RQ-180 stealth drones emerged from the clouds, one looping wide to flank the enemy drone, the other locking onto the thermal trail of the miniature sub, now directly beneath Sentinel's hull. "Execute flare burst," Torres ordered. A bright red pyrotechnic lit the sky over the carrier, not as a distress call, but as a timestamp. The exact moment surveillance turned to counterstrike. The signal jammers activated. The enemy drone froze mid-air. Simultaneously, a shaped charge depth emitter detonated. Just outside the blast-safe zone underwater, rocking the sub without destroying it, enough to scare, not to sink. All 3 signatures disappeared moments later, fled. Monroe stared at the console. "You show your hand," he said quietly, "and the rats scatter." Torres allowed herself the faintest smile. "But now we know their hands, too." The data gathered during those few minutes of exposure, thermal traces, acoustic patterns, electronic fingerprints, would now fuel months of analysis. Every piece of intel gathered not only proved the enemy's tactics but built a blueprint of their reach. The lesson was hard-earned. Total silence had its limits. Sometimes the only way to smoke out a predator was to let it believe you were prey. Back in her quarters, Torres finally exhaled. The sky outside had gone black again. True dark. The kind she had once trusted. The kind she would now treat as a temporary tool, not a shield. Because the next time the Sentinel went dark, it wouldn't be to hide. It would be to hunt.